Hi, this is Dominic Pace, who plays Gecko the Bounty Hunter from the Mandalorian, and you are listening to What a Piece of Junk Podcast.
Hello, Space Junkies, and welcome back to the Drunken Gungan for episode 64 of What a Piece of Junk, the Star Wars podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. We have got everything you need to know about Star Wars this week, up to and including the most recent episode of Star Wars, The Bad Batch, episode 14, War Mantle. This was a great episode, and I am eager to discuss it with my co-hosts and with all of you listeners. So let me cut right to the chase and introduce the gang to you. I am Scott Vaughtman, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Derek Marsh. Derek, how are you doing, man?
I'm good. It's officially the first day of August 1st. There's a lot of birthdays celebrating today, including Howard the Duck, the movie, and turned 35, and MTV turned 40.
Oof, MTV turning 40 makes me feel like I'm just a dinosaur, dude.
So,
Ooh.
yeah. So my question is for you guys, because I have a fun question for this. Did you ever catch the Star Wars, any of those music videos on MTV? The few videos that they've made throughout the years. That can include the gimmicky stuff that Weird Al's done.
Oh, well then, yes, I saw the video for The Saga Begins with Weird Al when he was doing his episode 1 Phantom Menace prequel riff. And of course, I saw I believe I saw a music video on MTV once from Weird Al for Yoda, his riff on Lola from Eric Clapton. Excellent question.
Nathan.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Gooey Chewy. All the stuff Scott normally says.
Well, we can go back to that in a minute, but that's the question for you.
Yeah, so I didn't watch much MTV growing up. We're a country music family over here.
And CMT is not nearly as old as MTV, so, although, in all fairness...
It's like 30s, though, isn't it?
Yeah, they were around in the 90s.
In all fairness, Nathan is also not nearly as old as I am, so this all works out perfectly.
So I have seen The Saga Begins. I've not seen Yoda, so I might have to go check that one out. But I saw it much later on YouTube, not on MTV. In fact, just this past week, I saw a version of it which had a music teacher, a vocal teacher, actually, listening to it for, how does he sing this, and where is he matching certain things, and what kind of sounds is he making with his voice. It was fascinating. It all went right over my head because I'm not the musically inclined person on this podcast, but it was fascinating to listen to.
Nice.
Cool.
Actually, the first Star Wars music video, because there's only a few obviously out there. I mean, obviously now with YouTube and all the fun stuff. I mean, come on, who doesn't like, Yoda yelling at the stop the seagulls now? So, but actually, no, the first Star Wars music video I saw on MTV, because I can remember this, actually was the Mako version for the Star Wars theme Cantina Disco.
Oh yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, so I remember that video is a little weird because it's just basically a bunch of people dressed up in the 70s disco stuff dancing to Star Wars, but I do remember that. So,
well, everybody doesn't really think about it much these days, but when Star Wars was ruling the whole world back in the 1970s, it was like the biggest movie ever, and
merchandise.
That's right. Disco was also huge. So the overlap at the contemporary moment was unbelievable. And I love Bill Murray's lounge singer version of the Star Wars theme from Saturday
Star Wars.
Nothing but Star Wars all of the time. Yeah. Anyway, you were saying,
so if
Nathan?
you do want to check out that YouTube video, it's by Beth Roars, and his vocal coach reacts to Weird Al, The Saga Begins.
Okay, cool. The other big Star Wars music video I've seen on YouTube over the years that I loved was actually a mashup of Star Wars with a bunch of other John Williams music because Moose, help me out, Nathan. Moose
Butter.
Moose Butter did John Williams is the Man, I think is the name of the song. Isn't that right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
That one goes through, they're all a cappella.
Right.
It goes through a whole lot of John Williams music from a lot of different movies, from Jaws and all sorts of different things. But the lyrics are all Star Wars.
Yep.
My favorite part is when they're doing Jaws and Wookie, 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 Wookie.
Yeah, it's really great. And they also have a Superman section and, of course, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. But the guy who's
I was gonna say one more trivia question too. Did you guys know that the Star Wars and the Galactic Funk from Mako there actually did stay at top one of the Billboard 100 for 2 weeks in a row?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I'm telling you, man. The disco Star Wars crossover at that time, the contemporary moment, unbelievable.
It's still catchy.
Oh yeah. Well, the guy who was offering all that somewhat
Butterbean
musical commentary is the original Wookiee co-pilot, the gooey Chewie, our very own Dave Filclone, man of 1,000 nicknames, Nathan Miracle. Nathan, you seem completely drained of all battery power tonight, to be honest.
Yes, yes, I am. I was at an extended family reunion this week, and it went on for days, quite literally. And I am very much an introvert. And it was a lot of people that I only kind of sort of know. So it was quite draining. But I am here to talk about Star Wars, and that is exciting. So, yay, Star Wars.
Awesome. Well, speaking of being at some place to talk about Star Wars, let folks know where they can find the show out there on the old interwebs. Of course, our master feed is fpnet.podbean.com, or you can look for FPNET on the Podbean app on your smartphone. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network also on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and now part of the world-famous iHeartRadio network. Over on Facebook, Derek runs our Facebook group, which is What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast. You can email me between shows at whatapieceofjunkpod@gmail.com. Or you can email me while you're listening to the show. I guess you don't have to wait. And you can tweet us over on Twitter at WhatWars. And on Instagram, you can find us under the Fandom Podcast Network banner. Derek, let folks know about those Apple Podcast reviews, please.
Sure. So when you download or stream our podcast on Apple iTunes, you can go ahead and leave us a review. And as we mentioned, we do this for fun. We do appreciate everyone that streams or downloads our episodes. So if you want to leave us a review, whether it's positive or negative, whatever feedback, comments you want to, give us, we'd appreciate it. Again, those 5-star reviews are really important though, because it keeps us, at the top of the queue. And, I don't want to have Cad Bane come after us again. He was nice enough last time to take the little bit of the bribe that we gave him. But if any more, wishy-washy stuff and low score come at us, then Cad may come back. So I'd rather not have to deal with that.
Yeah, man, those teeth. I still have nightmares. All right, well, it is now time for Derek's favorite part of the show. What Star Wars shirts are we wearing this week? Nathan, you've got on a pretty cool looking one that is very apropos with tonight's episode discussion of the Bad Batch. Tell us what you got.
Yes, I am wearing a Wolfpack shirt. This shirt has a Loth Wolf on it. So it doesn't actually say Star Wars anywhere on it, but it does have the Republic logo behind the Loth Wolf icon. So it is a Star Wars shirt if you know what you're looking for. So I am representing my second favorite of the 3 clones that we see in Rebels, Wolf. My first favorite is, of course, Rex, and my third favorite, well, we'll talk about him later today. Derek, I can't see your shirt. What are you wearing today?
So I'm going to make you sweat here a little bit, Nathan, because unfortunately, you're a little tired, so you might have to try and read all of this.
Oh, no. Reading. Oh, reading is fundamental. But this is a periodic table of Star Wars elements. Oh,
Yes.
wow. Okay,
So-
so I can't read all of those that quickly.
Okay.
All right,
there-
you got to stand back
there's
up, Derek.
no
I'll put the
pictures.
spotlight on you there. Yeah, there's no pictures. It's just abbreviations. Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I see Luke Skywalker. I think that's Obi-Wan underneath him, or maybe it's Owen Lars. It's hard to tell because this is actually, like the periodic table, a bunch of capital letter followed by lowercase letter.
Oh, and
I'll post the picture on the Facebook group later. So
I do like though that they're in families, just like noble gases, alkaline,
Yes.
etc. But there's like Empire section, light side section, Rebel section. That's cool.
Well, let's hope that that T-shirt gets a good reaction.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
all right. And Scott, what shirt do you have on this week? Because as I mentioned, it kind of looks like you were a Boy Scout.
It does look a
leader
little
there.
bit like I'm a troop leader, but no, it is my button-down breast pocket shirt from Star Wars Celebration Chicago, which was the Star Wars Celebration in 2019. Still, the last Star Wars Celebration to have ever occurred. We will be having another one, hopefully, soon. And I just thought it would be really cool to wear this tonight. It's a nice, breathable, airy shirt because it's been pretty hot over here in the Queen City, Charlotte, North Carolina this week. And it is like Derek implied, from a Boy Scout looking shirt. It's a tannish color, and it's got a pattern with the light side Jedi Order logo on it and the Star Wars Celebration logo repeated over and over on the pattern shirt, and then black plastic buttons for the button down short sleeve. A really great shirt. And I will
You could definitely wear it to a wedding reception.
I could wear it to a wedding reception, especially if that wedding reception was a Star Wars wedding reception. That would be awesome. Cool.
All
Well,
right.
if you folks out there would like to get your own awesome Star Wars shirt, you can check out two places on the old interwebs to buy them. Over at geekypockettees.com, a friend of the show, Terry Roberts Lee, makes geek-inspired left breast pocket t-shirts where the t-shirt is a solid color, but the left breast pocket is made from a fabric that is inspired by all of our geeky pursuits, like Star Wars, of course, Star Trek, Doctor Who, Harry Potter, Marvel Cinematic Universe, and so on and so forth. So please check out geekypockettees.com. And then you can find shirts inspired by What a Piece of Junk podcast and all kinds of other Fandom Podcast Network shows over at tpublic.com/user/Fandom Podcast Network. And it's not just t-shirts, it's sweatshirts, mouse pads, iPad covers, iPhone covers, all sorts of things that you can get your merch on. All right, guys, I'm going to step over to the bar here on Darrow real quick. Everybody thinks this planet is uninhabited, but we actually found an Imperial commissary here. And I'm going to grab a drink and see if the guy in charge of the bar has any news or rumors for me this week. All right, I'm back. Even though it is an Imperial commissary, looks like this place is training clone troopers, but I didn't know that was even a thing. I was able to find one more can of my beloved late summer treat, Mountain Dew Baja Blast, which frankly, when you put it into a mug like I have tonight, looks like something that you would drink on a science fiction television show, because it's so green that it's veritably glowing green.
I mean, it looks like Spatuka.
It's a little too green to be Spatuka. It need to be a little bluer. That
depends on how you make your Spatuka.
Oh, that's true. I actually found a recipe for making Spatuka online. Did I tell you this, Nathan?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, I even joked around with Big Mike that I was going to make it and bring a jug with me to ScottCon because it includes not a small amount of alcohol. Because the guy who made the recipe was like, we wanted to have a glowy Star Wars drink to drink while watching The Mandalorian, and we wanted to get drunk. So yeah, I'll find that recipe and try to make it someday. It is not quite as high test as the guys that I knew in college who made their own Star Trek inspired
Romulan ale. Yeah, I was going to say.
Romulan ale back in the day used to consist of nearly 100% of wintergreen Listerine, which certainly has alcohol and is almost glowy blue.
Oh, Romulan ale should be illegal.
That one definitely was, because it was like 7,000 proof.
That would be a fun show instead of moonshiners, Romulan ailers, shiners, or whatever you want to call it.
That's
Or
awesome.
just a bunch of people like trying to make like, actual illegal alcohol, right? But based off of, sci-fi or fantasy, shows to be pretty funny.
So my friends and I, during that Star Trek party in college, we were not big on partaking of the alcohol, so we snuck in some cool blue Gatorade, and it looked almost exactly the same, and we did not get wasted. So it was pretty cool.
Actually, you were quite rehydrated.
We felt great. It's like I could run a marathon. These little guys are passing out over here. Anyway,
They can't hold their alcohol, according to Scotty.
right. Anyway, although that makes another great joke about Baja Blast, because when Scotty gets asked about the alcohol on Next Generation, they're like, "What is it?" It's green.
Green.
Well, the bartender here at the commissary had a lot of information about one Luke Skywalker, as you might imagine from an Imperial bartender. But in all honesty, the Star Wars news that we were able to dig up this week all has something to do with our beloved Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill himself. First up, Lucasfilm has hired the guy on YouTube who did a much better job of deep faking Mark Hamill on the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian than, honestly, the guys at ILM did themselves. I know a lot of fans saw this back when he first released it several months ago, but the guy known on YouTube as Shamuk has recently posted on his personal social media feeds that he does indeed have a new job working with Lucasfilm, presumably doing stuff on deepfakes and so forth, because his new title is Senior Facial Capture Artist.
That you would never think 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, would be a title.
Yep.
But not just that. I mean, just think it's Star Wars and possibly Marvel.
Yeah, totally. And so he is also the guy. Shamuk also did some, proof of concept examples with his software, which is by the way, the software he used, you can go buy it. I mean, it's not super cheap, but it's not like you have state secrets to get access to the code. He also redid the Grand Moff Tarkin Peter Cushing from Rogue One and the Carrie Fisher Princess Leia from Rogue One. And again, all respect to the guys at ILM, could never do what they do, but Shamuk here puts them to shame with all three of his examples, both Mark Hamill, Peter Cushing, and Carrie Fisher. So yeah, it's amazing stuff, and hats off to him, guys, for putting it out there in a respectful way, such that instead of just dogging out the company, he got noticed and got a job. Derek, did you ever think that this guy might get hired by Lucasfilm after you saw his work?
Well, we always would think it's like, why did they hire this guy, right? So yeah. I mean, or at the end of the day, learn from this guy, right? So the student now becomes the master. So, but no, good for him. There's obviously a lot of people out there that have really good skills, and sometimes some people just have this knack. It's kind of funny. People would do, I would make some fun little images and stuff like that using paint, right? Just copying and pasting one image over to another, and people are like, oh my God, that's so good. I'm like, yeah, it's with paint. They're like, paint? It's not Photoshopped? I'm like, no, it's paint.
Yeah.
Because I didn't own Photoshop.
Right. Yep. Nathan, this is an interesting situation for you, because I've known you long enough to realize that you don't do a lot with faces. Like, in all honesty, in real life, you don't really recognize people's faces. You are much better at recognizing people's voices or just mannerisms. Did you notice a major difference when you looked at the Lucasfilm version of, say, Mark Hamill in The Mandalorian versus Shamuk's version?
So you're absolutely right. I don't do nearly as well with faces as I do with voices, which is why often on this podcast, y'all mention an actor or an actress. I'm like, I have no idea who this is. But then we start talking voice actors. I'm like, yes, let me weigh in on that. Just in regular life, I have an aversion to eyes. I look at people's noses. So looking side by side, I can definitely tell a difference.
Okay.
I don't know that I would have been able to tell just looking at each one individually, because the guys at ILM do know what they're doing. They did a great job. When I was in the theater and saw Rogue One, when not Peter Cushing turned around, I thought, oh my gosh, how did they get somebody who looks so much like Peter Cushing?
Live.
Yeah, right. Which is so
But
great, considering Cushing once played Dr. Frankenstein. It's alive. All right, sorry.
Yeah, but at the same time, I didn't look at it and go, this is Peter Cushing.
Yeah.
I looked at it and said, oh man, who did they get who looks this much like Peter Cushing?
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas looking at these side by side, this looks like Peter Cushing. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, the article that we're working off of here for this headline is from our friends at TheVerge.com, written by Sean Hollister. And Sean says in his little section about Peter Cushing specifically, he was certainly a very thin actor at that stage of his life because, Peter was pretty old when he was in Star Wars. But in the Rogue One version, he looked almost gaunt or emaciated. And so Sean writes, Peter Cushing was certainly thin in the role, but he no longer looks quite so emaciated, referencing Shamook's version. Shamook has given him a little more luster. I think a lot of it is the lighting. Shamook's work has paid attention to the scene into which the character walks with a little more direct detail, I think, because both in Mark Hamill's version and Peter Cushing's version, the lights reflecting off of their eyeballs, their pupils, look much more like, oh, that's that light in the room where Din Djarin and the rest of them are, or oh, that's the light in the room on the bridge of the Star Destroyer where Tarkin is. Whereas in the original versions from Lucasfilm, yes, there's light reflecting off their pupils, like happens to us, human beings, but it doesn't always look like it's in that room where the character is. So I think that's one of the major details that Shamook's work takes into account in a more skillful way than what we saw from ILM.
And now he's got a job running it.
Yeah. So,
and I think
kudos to him.
that part is great. I'm so glad that they took the reaction of, hey, this guy is doing great work. Let's hire him, when they could easily have taken the tact of, hey, this guy
Let's sue
is,
him.
Yeah,
right.
let's send him a cease and desist and tell him that he cannot do this anymore because he's taking our intellectual property and altering it and redistributing it. They were within their rights to say, hey, cease and desist. But I think it is a better reaction to say, hey, we recognize the talent that you have that you can bring to us. And that the passion, honestly.
Yeah. And this is a big moment for corporations to realize what Nathan just talked about. You can do a much better job of protecting your brand and growing your brand by reaching out to these fan creators that have this amazing skill and offering them a job, or at the very least a small project, because other fandom-based companies are starting to learn that lesson as well. Over in my beloved Warhammer 40,000 hobby, Games Workshop, the British company that makes Warhammer 40,000 and all the Warhammer products, they have in the past been notorious for shutting people down when they do fan-made films and projects and animations and so forth. But over the past 18 months or so, they have taken a slightly different tact. They put out a very stringent list of, here are the things that we'll accept people doing online and won't bother them. But they also reached out to the creators behind some of the biggest Games Workshop War Machine related fan films and offered all of them jobs. And almost, I think we're up to like 12 fan creators that have been hired by GW. And earlier this year, Games Workshop announced Warhammer Plus, which is going to be their own subscription service that, in addition to giving you game content for you to use in their products, they're going to have original productions made by these fan creators on a service that, let's be honest, I am definitely going to subscribe to. So it looks like it's the best of both worlds, both for the fan creators, because like Nathan said, they didn't get hit with a cease and desist and threat of lawsuit. They got a job doing something they love. And for us fans, it's enough content that GW Mothership thinks they can have a streamable model. So yeah, I'm going to subscribe, get to watch all these cartoons, get rules updates, get book updates, get ebook versions of all these things that I was going to buy anyway. And the best part is, after 12 months of subscription, you get a free model to use in the game that is exclusive to the subscription service, because of course it's exclusive. So this is the era of, would you send your team of lawyers online? It's to find people to make job offers to, not to shut them down. Because I think companies that take the tact of, hey, we're going to shut everything down, are going to find fans backlash against them, and they're just not going to be companies anymore.
Yeah, with the power of social media, it's not like someone just gets a letter, right? And then you never hear from them again, like the mafia, right? At the end of the day, they take a picture and post it on Twitter and be like, look at these jack, people, throwing their weight around. So yes, definitely applause. Like you said, to pick up the talent. And on top of that, I mean, now you just gained potentially that many more fans. Right. Because sometimes you'd be surprised that people are like, I never seen a Star Wars movie, but I watch YouTube like crazy, and now I'm going to see this guy's work. Okay, maybe I'll watch the show.
Yeah, totally. All right. Well,
unfortunately, we have a counter example of this recently, this week even. Atomic Mass Games no longer employs Luke Eddy, who was an employee of Fantasy Flight Games and was instrumental in the creation of Legion, the Star Wars model game. So hopefully more companies will take the higher good talent tact, and less will take the, okay, we got what we need from you, goodbye tact.
Now, Nathan, did Eddie rise to fame due to his own fan-made stuff at first? Is that what you mean?
No, but I do mean that he transitioned to Atomic Mass Games from Fantasy Flight Games when when Asmodee moved all of the Star Wars stuff, and he was about the only person that they kept from that.
Oh, okay.
But it turns out, I don't know if this was their original intention or not, but they kept him kind of long enough to get things transitioned, and that was it.
Now, sometimes that's just the way corporations go when it comes to
that's
mergers.
True. Yeah.
But it is sad now that none of the original team for Star Wars Legion is still working on the game. But we'll do a Star Wars Legion related episode sometime soon, I'm sure. Because while that's said, several new things have been announced for Legion that look pretty great. So it would be nice time for a new Star Wars Legion update episode of the podcast. Speaking of updates, though, we get an update to Disney Gallery over on Disney Plus coming, and my bartender friend told me that he had seen even more Luke Skywalker evidence recently, and that is with the announcement of Disney Gallery Season 2, Episode 2 for Star Wars The Mandalorian, where we have talked about this earlier episodes, but they're going to do an entire episode about that Season 2 finale where Mark Hamill reprised his role as a younger Luke Skywalker, looking more like he did in Return of the Jedi, and he comes to the Imperial ship to rescue baby Yoda. Grogu. Along with R2-D2, by the way. Everybody gets hung up on Luke making his return in this episode, but we also got to see a original trilogy era R2-D2 model on screen for the first time in a while. But guys, there was a picture released this week as a teaser for this episode of Disney Gallery that shows Mark Hamill in costume, wearing the black robes and the black glove that Luke Skywalker had on in that episode, and holding a Grogu puppet on set, standing next to R2-D2, actual physical robot model, with a boom mic in the shot and a technician cleaning the floor right in front of him. I was blown away because at first I thought this was just a photoshopped image, but no, this is purported to be a photograph of Mark Hamill on set, old man Mark Hamill, gray-haired Mark Hamill, wearing the Luke costume, holding baby Yoda. Derek put this up in our Facebook group, and I didn't realize that Mark Hamill had been on set. In fact, so many places we were told, no, Mark Hamill wasn't on set, and we, the actors, didn't even know that it was going to be Luke Skywalker who made the rescue. Derek, you had found this earlier and put it in the Facebook group because you're awesome at doing that. What are your thoughts about this revelation?
Well, it was kind of funny because we were joking about it. It's like, what happens if this is a deep fake of somebody putting Mark Hamill in this just to make it sound like it,
Yeah.
But obviously, I mean, we won't really know until the episode, right? Because we've had this discussion on a previous episode of, kind of anticipating this Gallery 2 or season 2 finale, was Mark Hamill on it or not? I got this feeling, like I said, from some of the stars like Gina Carano and stuff that talked about towards the end of the episode 1 of the second season Gallery, that she's heard rumors about so-and-so's on it, blah, blah, blah. And then, she finally got to see it, right? All this stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's like, was she talking about Mark Hamill, or was she talking about the character of Luke Skywalker? We still, and then, like I said, then it ends and we never really got the resolution until now,
right?
When it comes up. So, the way this looks, Mark Hamill was at least on some sort of stage being filmed for the finale here. The way the picture looks like, it doesn't look like he's, other than holding Grogu and R2, like you said, there's just the puppeteer that you see at the base. At least I think that's a puppeteer. It could be a cameraman for all I know. It's hard to see because the text box at the bottom is kind of blocking what he's doing. But I mean, it looks like he was on stage somewhere. And I think, this was potentially, they filmed this separate of what they actually filmed the other stars then, where they had somebody stand in. And then, as I mentioned to you earlier offline, that they actually imposed both of those. So they imposed the actor, then they imposed the real Mark Hamill, of course, older as himself, because even here you could see he's got his beard on it. They didn't make him shave.
Right.
And then on top of that, then you had the ILML artists do the deep fake CGI. So you really almost had a 3-way transition rather than just the double overlay. So, or it could have been them just doing Mark and him doing, because we know he did the voice acting portion, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So maybe he just, so he got into character, felt better rather than just doing it in some recording studio. Not that Mark isn't 100% professionally trained and hasn't been able to do enough voice acting, not actually being, on a set anywhere. So I'm sure he could have pulled that off by himself if he needed to, but who knows? Obviously Mark talked about it in his, after the episode was released, how he was blessed, thanking everyone, thanking John and Dave for giving him the opportunity to reprise the role. So that's where I always thought that he at least got to put on the cape and cloak again and, and reprise Luke Skywalker at least one more time to this date.
Yeah. Nathan, we heard Katie Sackhoff say that she didn't know it was Luke Skywalker till she watched the finale. So clearly, if Hamill was on set, she wasn't there that day.
Bad day to call in sick to the office, right?
That's right. Yeah. But do you think that maybe there's a possibility that they brought Mark Hamill onto a set to record his dialogue with the correct reverberations for being in that same room where they had put Pedro Pascal and friends, Nathan?
I think that's very likely. They could easily have brought him in later, depending on how things were shot, what order things were shot in. That set might still have been up, and they could have just brought him in after they had told all the other actors, "Hey, we've wrapped." Or they could have snuck him in under the cloak of darkness of night and said, "Yeah, everybody, go home. We have nothing else to shoot today. It's only noon. Don't worry about it. Go home. Take a half day."
Right.
But yeah, like you said, he's clearly on a set. It looks like the set. So unless they painstakingly recreated that particular set, then they had to have figured out some way in time to get him on there that didn't tip off the rest of the cast.
Yeah. In the lead up, or I guess I should say immediate follow up to Luke Skywalker's appearance, of course, we all recall Jon Favreau talking about how he was just blown away that they were able to keep it a secret and that nobody knew for sure until the episode aired, because he said, quote, "Every piece of casting leaked ahead of season 2, including Tamora Morrison as Boba Fett and Katie Sackhoff as live action Bo-Katan." And he said, "We were scared right up until Chapter 16 aired that our surprise cameo was going to leak as well." Of course, that was back in December. And also back in December, Luke himself, Mark Hamill, tweeted, "The fact that we were able to keep my involvement a secret for over a year with no leaks is nothing less than a miracle. A real triumph for spoiler haters everywhere." So yeah, guys, I am super excited to watch this episode of Disney Gallery The Mandalorian. It comes on Disney Plus August 25th. So we will get to see exactly how they pulled this off and which parts of it were the stand-in guy and which parts of it apparently were Mark Hamill on set as Luke Skywalker. Yeah, so that's amazing. And one more piece of Mark Hamill related news tonight's episode from my friend, the Imperial Bartender. Mark Hamill has a story behind the group reunion photo that he was in that features one Jar Binks. Derek, take it away. You were the one that brought this up.
Yeah. So, there was a famous photo of them all reunionized way back then. And, Mark came out and said, fun fact, he was too busy because he was on Broadway at the time doing 8 shows a week that he couldn't attend this photo shoot. So they actually had him photoshopped into it. So poor Mark yet again is getting deep fake cut into somewhere, right? So so I thought that was just pretty funny and kind of thematic to what we were relating the other 2 topics tonight. But Uncle Mark being Uncle Mark with some funny trivia.
Good times. Now, this is the I believe it was Entertainment Weekly's reunion series of articles in their magazine back in the day, right? I'm trying to remember which.
I think that's right, or it might have been Vanity Fair. I've definitely seen some of this picture before. I recognize Carrie Fisher with her arm around Harrison Ford there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Trying to figure out when this reunion photo happened.
Yeah, it doesn't say it.
Well, anyway, the point is that Mark wasn't actually there with the rest of them. And when we say the rest of them, my gosh, this is the saga spanning reunion photo. Because you've got R2 and 3PO, you've got Sam Jackson there, from being
grumpy.
Yep. You've got
Christopher Lee
there, Count Dooku. Shmi Skywalker is there. A young
Bail Organa
there. Yep. Jimmy Smits is there as Bail Organa, and you've got Liam Neeson there as Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn. But also prop wise, you've got General Grievous looming large behind Ian McDermott and Billy D. Williams.
Is that the kid who played Annie?
That is, yeah. That's Jake Lloyd.
Jake Lloyd's okay.
Liam Neeson, yeah.
Yes,
and Peter Mayhew is there. The late great Peter Mayhew is there in costume as Chewbacca.
And if you open it up to the left, not visible on the initial screen, there is a Darth Vader, Yoda, and the man himself, George Lucas.
As well as
Ewan McGregor,
Hayden Christensen, and Natalie Portman. So it was, at that time, it was the entire span of the saga.
That's funny.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, now it's going to drive me insane to figure out where this photo came from. I'm going to have to look that up. Yeah.
All right, I'll keep Googling it while you...
I'll vamp while you do some internet research. May your Google foo be strong. It's a beautiful picture, of course. We love all the nostalgia that it gives us with this photo here. This may have been back around the time of Revenge of the Sith, because it was sort of a, what we thought would be a farewell to the Star Wars saga, because I have 2 different issues of Time magazine, not photographed by Leibowitz, but 2 different issues of Time magazine with the headline "The Last Star Wars," because Return of the Jedi had it going on, and then of course many years later we had Revenge of the Sith come out, and there was a huge ad campaign, Nathan, that focused on The Last Star Wars. Nathan, do you have memories of them referring to Revenge of the Sith as the final Star Wars film?
Vanity Fair,
awesome.
Aha! Oh my gosh, I was right. Oh, the blind nut found the squirrel. No, scratch that. Reverse it. No, Scott, I do not remember them calling it the final Star Wars. Although I do believe I heard the saga concludes a few times.
Mm-hmm.
of course, referring to the Skywalker saga, which clearly only has 6 movies in it, not 9, and there'll never be a 7 through 9,
Right.
or so we thought
Right.
at the time.
Good times. Well, anyway, yes, it was a 2005 Star Wars photo for Vanity Fair.
Yep, I found the cover.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, but it's really funny to find out that Mark wasn't actually there. That must have been quite disappointing for him for a variety of reasons, because, man, that was quite a gathering. All right, well, that is all that I got as far as Star Wars news and rumors go this week. So we're going to take a short break so that you can learn about the other shows here on the Fandom Podcast Network, and then we'll come back to talk about The Bad Batch Episode 14, War Mantle.
Hi, this is Delilah S. Dawson and her current cold virus, and you are listening to What a Piece of Junk podcast.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Bloody Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
Hi, this is Eric Walker, the original Mace, the OM in the universe. Sorry, Sam Jackson. And you're listening to What a Piece of Junk podcast.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kevin, for keeping us up to date on what else is happening on the FPN. Guys, this was the episode that a lot of us had been waiting for Star Wars The Bad Batch. We get to see clone troopers and stormtroopers fight each other. We get to see the Bad Batch do their commando best routine as they infiltrate what is essentially an enemy base to make a daring rescue of one of their clone brothers. And we had tons of Star Wars flavored action. We even had, much to my delight, musical cues from A New Hope as the Bad Batch snuck around an Imperial base on the planet of Darrow, where they were doing essentially what Luke and friends did when they snuck around the Death Star in episode 4, and you heard that dun, da, 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 as they were trying to not get caught by the stormtroopers. And even more to my original era fan heart's delight, we got to see Ralph McQuarrie prototypes of stormtroopers be realized in Star Wars animation for the first time. Now, they didn't quite have their laser swords and shields, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw those if we get a Bad Batch Season 2. I was over the moon with this episode and enjoyed every second of it. Derek, what are your overall thoughts before we jump into the 5 questions?
Yeah, just this is what we've been waiting for, right? I mean, we were so hyped after episode 12, thinking, yes, we're getting into it. It's gonna be either we figured it'd be something with more Ryloth potentially, but we figured if not, it was going to be a 4-episode, our mini arc, right, for the last 4 final episodes. And we got last week's episode, but this one delivered, was great. Definitely be excited to talk about what we liked and what we didn't like. So
Nathan, overall thoughts before we jump into questions 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5?
Very enjoyable episode. I, as Derek would agree, I'm sure, wish that the last episode was more like this one. There's some few things that I would have liked to have seen a little bit different, but overall, very happy with this episode. Very happy and very excited to get into these questions.
Awesome sauce. Well, I'll go first and answer question number 1 myself first. Question 1, of course, what did you like most about this episode? And for me, it's the little things. I mentioned the music and the Ralph McQuarrie inspired TK Troopers, but I loved seeing the Wings return to action during this part of the episode where the Bad Batch's ship, the Marauder, is being chased by presumably TK pilots piloting V-Wing starfighters, trying to shoot them down and make it where they cannot escape. V-Wings were always a cool craft design, in my opinion, and I felt like we never got to see quite enough of them during the prequel era and the Clone Wars. So I'm always glad to see them taking front and center during a nice dogfight scene where a much larger gunship is outnumbered and outgunned, but still makes the escape. Derek, what was your most favorite thing? What did you like most about this episode?
Mine's actually going to be a 2-parter. The first one is because it's generic enough, I think, because you mentioned a little bit about like the music and stuff, but to me, it was the visualization. I love the beauty of Daro, everything that they did with it. It was just really, really captivating. And it just felt like, okay, here is, I'm not saying you can't have, desert planets, you can't have, water filled or lava filled or, whatever, but it was just a gorgeous piece of artwork that it felt like, hey, here was like someone actually spent a lot of time building this planet, and the scenes that the the Bad Batch were in and then the Imperial base. But so really just that was the first thing that captivated me, especially once they landed, right? And you just saw that all that interaction throughout the episode. But my big one really was that the story, at least this episode so far, is what I really enjoyed the most. It was, back to the basics in some aspect of like, okay, here's our mission. Here's what we need to do. Yeah, we get it. But it was just the way they executed it. It felt like, okay, here's Rex calling for help. But he can't talk, so they don't really know what they're going into. They don't even know who really all this, it's just abandoned planet, but it's really not. You've got the things that actually did right to me in and how they're treating Omega with, hey, we don't know what we're walking into. Omega, you go back with Wrecker and sit at the ship, right? It's not just, we're going to bring Omega with us and hope for the best, right? And some zany, stupid crap happens and, she miraculously saves the day, or she's the one that gets into trouble to begin with. So I really like that, but then there was some good character development between her and Wrecker and continuing in the relationship at the ship, right? I thought there was some good parts to it. I liked, Wrecker still being a bit of the comedic thing. He's with the initially conversation. Well, he's got a good point. Well, he's got a good point. Well, she's got a good point. And it was just overall, just the writing was very on par with the storyline, the actual dialogue, the way it was going. I left on a very nice cliffhanger. I was a little, I'll get to that the next question, I guess. But overall, though, I was just very happy with the story and what they did in this episode, besides it being just, to me, probably the most beautiful piece of artwork besides episode 1/2.
Cool. Nathan, what was your favorite part about this episode?
I think my number one favorite part of this episode is something I've been asking for the entire season, and that is more information on what's going on with the clones, how are we transitioning to using non-clone troopers? And we get some good exposition on that without it feeling like exposition on that. We see that clone troopers are being used to train TK troopers. And I loved when they mentioned TK and Tech said, I'm not familiar with that designation. But that was almost a wink at the audience of, you guys are, if you've been watching Star Wars since the beginning, you've heard TK421. Why aren't you at your post? So I love the idea that there's a lot of TK421s, because I noticed there were 1,000 troopers. That would be 0 through 999. It's just TK421 is whichever one is the 421st one stationed at this location.
Whatever that platoon, yeah.
Right. yeah.
I always wondered about that, because TK, that if you just have 3 digits after that, they have way more than 1,000 troops. They have to. But anyways,
well, they die, so they just keep
they just keep replacing that one.
It's like your license plate, right?
Yeah, it's like Red 5 over in the Rebellion side. Because remember, in Rogue One, we learned that Luke is just a replacement Red 5.
That's true. But it makes sense that they would use the highly trained clones to train their stormtroopers, and use conscripts basically to be the cannon fodder. And it was presented in such a way that they didn't have to sit there and spoon feed it to you and say, hey, this is exactly what's happening. It's the classic show, don't tell. And they showed what was happening rather than just telling us, oh, right, this is how the Empire's structured.
Because when Star Wars takes a moment to quote unquote reply to all the complainers on YouTube, and somebody decides to just straight up tell us in exposition, the Emperor came back through Sith sorcery. Nobody likes that. The fans that didn't have a problem with it in the first place get annoyed that you broke out of the story to do that. And the people who complained on YouTube talk about how that's a dumb reason and you should have shown us more detail. And I'm like, yeah, see, so let's show, don't tell. However, keep in mind, I just said that when I move on to question number 2, what did you dislike the most about this episode? And for me, it was, I don't have any idea why Gregor didn't follow Order 66. I need either him to show me a scar on the back of his head, or mention to the Bad Batch that he's psycho, so it didn't work on him. Something. Why is Gregor? With Rex, he had to obey until Ahsoka was able to, get him under the knife, and cut the thing out of his head. And then he was convinced that the Bad Batch was going to do the same thing to him, Rex, when he came calling at Sid's parlor. Until he was able to get them under the knife and cut the things out of their heads. What happened to Gregor, and why isn't he all like, you're a bunch of traitors? Instead, he's all, that's Captain Traitor, to the guy who was giving him a hard time while he was in the prison cell on Taro. Anyway, that was my quibble, was, why is Gregor still, I was going to say sane, but that's the wrong word. Why is Gregor still on the good guy side instead of becoming a mindless automaton like Crosshair and all the others? Anyway, Derek, what did you dislike the most about this episode?
Really, the only thing, and it's nitpicking it a little bit, right? There's obviously
mine was too, honestly.
Yeah, but it's because I like the way it ended the episode, but at the same time, the ending a little bit got me where, again, due to the fault of Hunter not being able to hold on when he's jumping off a cliff onto a ship that's going backwards, trying to dodge other starships shooting at it, and he misses his grip on the landing or the ramp to get on and falls. Well, I don't know how he survived, right? So that was the main thing. Like, with all that heavy armor and you hit all that, like he should have been like broken bones. I'm sorry, unless if you're a Jedi and can use the Force. But that was the minor thing. But the other thing was with Crosshairs. I was hoping that, like, okay, so again, their fault. That's how he gets captured. And I thought it was great drama the way they built that too, because Omega is crying, no, we got to go back. And Hunter's like, follow orders, right? Go, and but it's like, okay, just because that happens and Hunter gets captured, now Crosshairs is here. It's like, I wanted Crosshairs to actually capture him or be part of it, right? It just, it kind of downplayed Crosshairs. And he's supposed to feel like the baddie, and he's not bad. or bad enough.
He's evil, but he's not badass, right? Yeah.
Well, not just enough. Like everything he's done, like really, he's just kind of been like, I'm gonna catch these guys, and it's just like, oh, some schmuck, guy that we talked about joked around. TK421's the one who caught him.
Yeah. All right, Nathan, what did you dislike the most about this episode?
All right. Well, I've got two things to talk about, and one relates back to what you talked about, Scott, and that is Gregor. Gregor originated in the D Squad sequence of the Clone Wars, which I'll tell you straight up, that's my least favorite section of the Clone Wars. I just did not enjoy that little general guy who the only reason he was a general is because he could fit inside an astromech. The best part of that particular arc was Gregor. So, at least he's got that going for it. But even then, I'm not a huge fan of Gregor. He wouldn't have been my first pick to bring back in Rebels in the first place. And he's not the guy that I'm most excited to see in this particular show. When they came up with the CT number on this one, I knew within seconds, because I was right close to my Google machine phone, that it was Gregor. Of course, I told everyone present, yes, that's Gregor, as though I knew it off the top of my head. But when I saw that it was Gregor, I'm like, okay, number one, I know he's not going to die. I know he's around later. Number two, not my favorite clone. I really would have preferred it to be Wolf. If it was going to be somebody that we knew was going to survive, I'd rather it be somebody I like a little bit better. Part of the reason I wore the Wolf shirt today.
Yeah, totally.
So that's one thing. The other thing, though, is more of a making some of the rest of the series not as good in retrospect. Sid wasn't involved at all in this episode, which, overall, I'm kind of okay with that. But Sid has been very important in previous episodes, and now they've kind of just dropped the character. In fact, the last episode we had was all about making sure that Sid was still okay and in charge of the place back on Ord Mantell. And it kind of feels, why did we bother doing that? This episode could have happened if in the last episode they just walked away from Sid's. So it kind of retroactively makes the previous episode even worse.
They did at least mention that they were on a job for Sid when Rex called and told them to deviate, and they debated it for a couple of seconds.
But they could easily have just been fleeing Ord Mantell when that happened.
True.
So,
but it makes sense though, because they're getting defective clones, and this is Rex calling out for help of it, right? So that's not going to be Sid's department, right? It wouldn't make sense for Sid to be involved with this at this point in time, because really Sid and Rex haven't interacted.
Right. But that's kind of my point, is we switched over to something that I think we all agree we like better than what we got in the last episode, but also kind of made that episode even more meaningless than we kind of already felt that it was.
Well, absolutely. I loved your analogy that we talked last week with the way the ending should have been, right? If the ending would have been that, then this would have made this episode more sense, right? Like, exactly. Hey, we got to go find ourselves a new home. And in the according to Sid, because we got our last place, blown up or, confiscated or whatever.
Took over or
something like, I agree with you. Like the story could have been a little bit better with it, but at the end, I still understand Sid's point, right? She's just them being able to survive day to day. This is how really the Bad Batch are dealing with the actual Empire now.
Yeah. I think what it comes down to is a good twist in storytelling is one that when you find out the twist, makes you go back and see everything that's happened up to this point in a new light, in a new context. It makes you excited to go back and see, oh man, how did we get to this point? What do we know now that we didn't know then that makes us see this in a whole nother light?
And Dave is good at that. We know Dave can do that. So,
he absolutely can.
And to be fair, I mean, I feel like this is how I've kind of come to peace with it after my, one of my initial thoughts of this series was one with the first 6 episodes, right? I feel like this is Clone Wars version 2.0, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing because Clone Wars season 1 is really no different than what
was not great. Yeah.
But it's just that it's a bunch of pieces, different pieces, right? And they all somehow come together, right? And I think that's what we're going to get. And if hopefully we get more than, one season, and I think season 2, season 3 is going to be definitely more what you're doing. This is still kind of laying a lot of groundwork, right? Unbeknown, because there hasn't been anything to this point other than from EU stuff. What happened from Revenge of the Sith till, other than what we got in Rebels, but that's still going to be like 10 years from now.
Yeah, and hopefully an upcoming episode does tie back these kind of disparate threads of season 1. But this episode certainly didn't do that. And that's not really the fault of this episode.
Right.
It's the fault of the episodes that led up to it.
Yeah.
The only okay, you know what? Speaking of connections to other episodes, question number 3. What connections did you draw between this episode and the larger Star Wars universe, Derek?
That the Empire loves building all their bases in secret mountains.
Yes, right. Yeah. Even in the old EU, we had the Spartan cloning cylinders at the base of a mountain.
So
yeah.
Because we obviously get this. We have Rogue One. We have obviously the Mandalorian season 2, right? So obviously they're building all this stuff because it's like, oh, this planet's abandoned, right? So, but then we even got that technically in Empire Strikes Back. Oh, this planet's abandoned. No, it's a rebel secret base this time, right? Instead of the Empire. So,
right.
But then in Starkiller Base goes to the whole next level where we just literally build an entire planet inside of a planet.
Oh, yeah, right. This planet's abandoned. No, it's not. Blam. Yes, it is. Start digging.
So, but yeah, I would say that. And then the beginning of the episode where Gregor's being chased down by the wolves. Did you guys get any Caravan of Courage vibes?
It was a little bit of that, but actually, when I saw the creatures chasing him, I thought of the dog-like creatures that the Tuskens had in episode 1 of season 2 of The Mandalorian. I think they're supposed to be the same doggo-looking things that were on this episode of the Bad Batch, as well as the season 2 of The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I knew they weren't big. Yeah, they weren't big like in Caravan of Courage, but I just get that feeling like because they're in the dark, they're running, they trip, blah blah blah, and they leave a little shiny thing that's flashing, right?
Yep,
like the wristbands. So
yep, exactly. And they're in a big forest, and there's trees that are laying sideways that are hollowed out. Yeah, definitely. Nathan, what connections did you draw between this episode and the larger Star Wars universe?
So many connections. Lots and lots of connections. Obviously, Gregor's a connection to both Rebels and to the Clone Wars. I agree with Derek about the Imperial bases. This one reminded me very much of the one we see in The Mandalorian, to the point where I was almost disappointed that nobody asked about the missing handrails. Still one of my favorite moments from The Mandalorian.
Well, and the clones were actually outside the tubes, not in the tubes.
Yep.
That is true. That is true. But anyways, and then we have the TK connection, which I thought was a great callback. And it felt, as you mentioned earlier, Scott, a lot like A New Hope with trying to escape the Imperial base when people are shooting at you.
And the music sounds exactly the same as when you're trying to escape the Death Star. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of chases, escapes, that sort of thing.
It would have been better had Hunter had to use his utility belt.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was waiting on some kind of a grappling hook swing across the big chasm. And I'm just like, oh no, never mind. But we did get into the garbage chute, essentially. So
it was more into the ventilation shaft.
Yes, that's true. It was more of a Cloud City reference than a Death Star reference. Good times.
There was a reference to the exhaust port.
Yep. So my answer to question 3 is very much related to what Nathan just said. There's so many connections that it was hard for me to pick just one, but my old man eyes loved seeing the big red computer console that Tech was standing in front of when he said we could escape through the ventilation shaft. It was almost a shot-for-shot recreation of Han, Chewie, and Luke standing in the docking bay control room on the Death Star with the big red computer console and the screen that was flipping through essentially a map of the base while Tech was trying to figure out how they could get out. And then he explains, there's this exhaust port. That's their weakness, and that's our escape. And boom, there you go. A classic commando raid where you crawl out, or in this case, run out of the ventilation shaft. But unfortunately for the Bad Batch, those epic Ralph McQuarrie inspired TK troopers and the really awesome looking clone commando guys with the glowy T-visors came and crossed their path, got them sort of trapped between a rock and an empty place because they had nowhere to run, and started firing at them, which leads me to my much more detailed question number 4. What is up with the Bad Batch firing so many stun bolts, you guys? And then very pointedly in this episode, there comes a moment where Wrecker and Omega have to come rescue them. And Wrecker is like, I ain't got time for stun bolts. Blam, 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 blam. What's the deal here, Derek? Why is the Bad Batch firing stun bolts? And then what happened to make Wrecker be like, nope, not this time?
Well, and not just that too. I assumed up to this point they were using stun bolts not to harm their brothers.
Right.
But now they knew that they weren't, right? Because they got the helmet off. They're like, hey, this isn't a clone. Right. What's going on? And I thought at that point, because I agree with you 100%. What the heck is with stunning at this point? Now they're trying to kill you. They're not clones. Game on, man. So but I don't know. I don't know if, again, it's the good guys trying to be good, but to me, that's a good point. Like, that doesn't seem like what the Bad Batch would do, right? Especially once they knew it wasn't clones anymore. If
that was the case, what was up with Wrecker deciding not to do it? Or maybe this is some sort of hardware limitation on that blaster that Wrecker had. Maybe it doesn't. This one doesn't do stun, right? Because it was, vehicle mounted weapon, starship mounted weapon. I don't know. I mean, I definitely get the whole. We know that these clones are not exactly operating with their own free will because we had those chips in our heads and we had to get them removed. And we all saw what happened to Wrecker when his got turned on. So, we're going to make sure we don't kill them for things that we feel like is not their fault. But like you said, once they realized these are TK troopers, they were, and there's no shortage of live ammunition being used by the Imperial forces.
I mean, and they shot their own guy too, which was pretty funny.
Yeah. And then, I loved when the commando clone trooper got stunned and it didn't work, and they're like, stun, and they just had to tranquilize him with 6 elephant darts before he would actually go down, right? But then obviously when it was, my favorite part of this episode where the V-Wings are chasing the Marauder and Wrecker once again and Tech have no problem firing real weapons at the starships that are chasing them. I mean,
well, they don't make stun starship weapons.
They don't, but they make ion cannons. Yeah. And so,
well, obviously that ship didn't have it, right? So
I guess I don't. But my point was, why are they okay blowing up the starships? They know those guys, if the pilot's going to die. And we don't, and thankfully we don't get a G.I. Joe moment where every time a Rattler or a Sky Striker gets blown up, you see a parachute. Because
I'm okay.
Yeah, right. If you go back and watch G.I. Joe cartoons, that happens. Anyway, Nathan, what are your thoughts about the whole thing with the stun bolts and then Wrecker's like, no time for that, boys?
Well, I'm glad you asked Derek first, because that gave me a lot of time to think about this question and come up with what I believe is the best possible answer, and that is stun bolts look cooler.
Oh, all right.
That's the only answer I can think of, because you're absolutely right. It makes no tactical sense for the Bad Batch to be stunning all the bad guys in this case. I have no idea why they weren't using live ammunition until a certain point when they suddenly decided, let's do it.
Yeah, and that's the worst part about it to me, is that we didn't have, I mean, I know I just said show, don't tell, but we could have at least had Hunter say, these aren't clones, switch to live rounds, we got to get out of here, something like that. But instead, Wrecker just, I guess, takes his own initiative and is all, I'm gonna kill these guys.
Now I will say Wrecker's gun, he is holding it in his hands, but it is a much different configuration of gun than the others. So I'm not sure it would have had a stun setting anyway.
Yeah, that's right. It's like this one doesn't do stun.
But then why pick up that weapon if everybody else is going to be doing stun guns? Why not pick up one that has a stun?
I hope that they address it at some point, like even at some, just have Hunter say, it's too late to save our brothers, we have to switch to live rounds, or maybe he'll say something like, we don't have to worry about stealth on this mission, guys, bring the live rounds, something like that. But I don't know. It's weird.
I really can't explain it.
All right. Well, speaking of things we don't have the explanation for yet, Nathan, take us away with the final question, number 5.
All right. Well, the final question, number 5, is what do you think happened to Lamasu? And I'm going to ask you this question first, Scott, because you rarely get to answer the questions first. So I'm putting you on the spot. What happened to Lamasu?
So Lamasu being the scientist girl from Camino, right? Or is Lamasu
no, that's a politician.
Okay. Lamasu, I believe, is dead. I would have liked to have actually seen a muzzle flash as the door closed behind Admiral Rampart. We didn't see that. So, of course.
Did we even hear a sound? I didn't even hear a blaster right
No, we didn't hear a blaster bolt yet. So whatever they're going to do to him, they did off screen. Of course, if the Bad Batch has taught me anything, it's don't assume someone is dead in Star Wars, even if they take a blaster bolt to the LeCue at the top of their head. What's up, Senator on Frita? Anyway, so it could very well be that Lamasu is not dead, but it was heavily implied by Rampart that the Empire has no further use for you. You know too much, so we're going to eliminate you. What was it that Dooku told Jango Fett? No loose ends. And I believe in this case, Lamasu would be a huge loose end. I was somewhat disappointed that Lamasu seemed to have been taken by surprise with the Empire. I almost felt like when he and is it Ton Wei that's the scientist? Who's the scientist?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Ton Wei's the scientist.
He and Ton Wei were talking earlier in this episode about let's get ready to get out of here. And he's like, I think the Empire might decide that they have no further use for us. I just feel like it's such a logistics-oriented guy that he would have had a backup plan for how to escape his own base. But, maybe he felt that evacuate in a moment of triumph.
Well, but he talks about evacuating, too. He talks about gather up all the essential personnel. We're headed out.
I thought Ton Wei betrayed him.
We're just going to make sure to wait long enough for the Empire to realize that we're getting out of here.
Oh, that's an interesting idea, Derek. Okay, yeah. So, Derek, your answer. What do you think happens to Lamasu?
Okay, so let's take this for a moment. I would think that they're pretty smart, right? And so
let's just take
the Kaminoans.
Kaminoans, okay.
Okay. So let's just say though somebody I don't know asks you to build something, and for whatever reason they tell you to put this code in, right? And let's be honest, Kaminoans know what the code is. They know what Order 66 is. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if someone's telling you what to do, you think you'd put your own code in there because at some point they may use those clones against you. Yeah. So I think once the door closes, he orders executes Order 99 or 00 or whatever it needs to be, that they just either shut off or then follow his order.
Oh, I think Rampart was one step ahead of him on this, because did you notice the troops that came in to get Lamasu were the black armored, green visored guys?
Were they?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think they were clone troops. If they were, I misunderstood the armor coloring.
I thought they were clones. So, all right, Nathan, you have to settle this because you're the clone expert. Were they clones or not clones?
That is an excellent question that I will have an answer for momentarily. But until I do.
But yes. I would think that would have been his case, though, because, I mean, really, But if they're not, I mean, that's a good thing. But like I said, not hearing the blaster bolts just makes me think, I mean, because let's be honest. Like I said, we saw someone get shot in the head.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's no like no violence here. Like they could have shot him in the shoulder and he would have been quote unquote dead, right? So
Yeah. So these are definitely the darker armor non-clone troopers.
Oh, okay.
See, I think Rampart might have been thinking ahead like you were, Derek. And he's like, just in case he's got some, because you know how it is when you're the security expert for the cybernet, you put in some back door, right? And so just in case the Kaminoans have some back door with the inhibitor chips, he made sure that it wasn't clones that came to kill him.
Well, you still could. As soon as the door closed, that a bunch of little Omega clones came out and like, ransacked them or something, right?
Or, for all we know, the Kaminoans are like incredibly gifted with the Force. They just haven't shown it yet. And those guys are all like, "You're coming with us. Time to die." And he's all like, "I think not."
Yeah, do Stranger Things 11, right?
Right.
So,
He just incinerates them or whatever.
nosebleeds, but yes.
Floods the compartment with gas that kills anyone who isn't Kaminoan.
It's entirely possible. So my response to this question, Scott, you actually stole my thunder here. I was going to point out, I think Lamasu is every bit as dead as Ornfrita, which is to say, who knows?
Yeah, right. Which is
Maybe,
not
maybe
dead,
not. It's Schrodinger's Kaminoan. The real question is, does Lamasu have a role to play in season 2? If so, Lamasu is fine and escaped somehow. If not, Lamasu is dead.
Yeah. There's been actually a lot less death of named characters on the Bad Batch than I was expecting when this series began. I mean, I didn't expect the actual Batchers to die, but I expected we would meet, new character A. Well, that guy's toast, but so far it hasn't really happened that much.
Yeah, what new characters have died, actually?
I don't think any of the people that we've met in season 1 have met their demise. Even the Roland Durand guy from last episode, when you would have thought the Pikes would kill him to make an example, they just chopped off the horn.
Yeah, the Separatist guy that they rescued made it out. Julian Bashir, or Alexander Siddig, I mean.
Yeah. Of course. Now, we did see some of Saw Gerrera's partisan friends get flamethrowered. So those guys.
Yeah, but they made sure not to give those characters names before they killed them.
They didn't have names. You're right about that. Yep. Fascinating. Well, you can be sure that if any of the new characters or old characters do meet their end on a future episode, we will talk about it right here on What a Piece of Junk. But until next time, we want to thank all of our listeners for joining us for this episode. And please remember to hit us up on social media so that you can share your thoughts, reviews, comments, or suggestions for whatever we can do to help make this podcast more enjoyable for you. Derek, where can people find you on social media?
As you mentioned, you can find me on the Facebook group of What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast, under my real name, Derek Marsh, or as on Twitter, HoodieDM83. Nathan, where can the listeners find you?
You can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Gooey Chewy. That is GOOEYCHEWIE. Or you can find me on Facebook under my real name, Nathan Miracle. And Scott, where can people find you?
I am also on Facebook under my real name, Scott Botman, and I can be found on Twitter at ScotticusMax, or I do write my own science fiction novels, so please check out my author website, which is writegreatscott.com. But until next time, please remember to always respect each other and always respect each other's fandom. All right, Nathan, punch it.